So Ruth Carter is the costume designer for Black Panther. She won the Oscar for it, for people who, and she had spent all of this time in the bamboo shoot phase.
The bamboo shoot phase. Explain the bamboo shoot phase, because people might not know what that's about.
Bamboo is a very resilient, I guess, thing to grow. And one of the reasons why I guess it's so dominant is because most of its time is spent growing underground and developing all of these complex systems, growing into things and roots and doing all of that. So by the time it actually comes up, it's very well planted in the environment that it's in. So it's virtually impossible to get it out based on the network it's created underneath. Did I do a good job?
You did a great job.
Okay.
And the piece that, and this is important because to the untrained eye, it looks like what happens?
Nothing.
And then all of a sudden, it just shoots up.
Yeah. And so you had a podcast where you talked about Ruth Carter and how you feel you might be in the bamboo shoot because you were going Paulo Coelho.
Yeah, Paulo Coelho is the author.
Is the author for book. And I know I'm all over the place.
The
Forgive
book
me
is
in advance. Aleph.
Yeah.
Ruth Carter is the costume designer who did Black Panther, where she finally got her quote unquote flowers, her notoriety, where the bamboo
just shoots straight up. But she had spent all of this time doing work for films. She did Amistad, she did Mo Better Blues, she did Malcolm X. She said she did Do the Right Thing. She did School Days.
Baby Boy. She did all of these movies. And then one day she just pops up through Black Panther and everybody's talking about how great she is, acknowledging.
But wait a minute. You remember the piece that I thought was most fascinating? She did all that work, and when Black Panther called, she almost didn't do it because she was scared.
It was scared.
She was too scared to do it. She thought she wasn't going to be able to do it.
Because of how the research and stuff that she did in the past, and because this was like a future new place.
It was like a place that didn't exist. And so before she had tied herself to history, and it was easy to kind of research, but this was like creating everything from scratch.
I related what she does to what you do in a way.
That makes sense to me.
In the segment, she made a statement, and I got to look it up real quick.
I love it. That's such a great episode.
She said, I needed to look like what I'm feeling in my soul. There were two things she said in that joint that stood out to me more than anything.
I love it.
I need this shit to look like what I'm feeling in my soul.
Right.
I'll know it when I see it, but I can't describe it.
Yep.
And I'm in pursuit of that. Is that how you?
Yeah, all day, every day. Like that's, and you know, I so appreciate this moment because like what you just said is almost like you were speaking life into me, like in this moment, because when I was asked to direct an opera, there were two responses. One was like, what? Why? And that was maybe one or two people. And everybody else was like, oh, that makes sense. And trying to adapt a story for a Black lead from an opera that was based on a white woman who was Swiss required that I had to readapt the story for this particular use. And there were all of these, they weren't barriers to me, but it was a very clear translation issue because I know what I want. I know how to articulate it, but I don't speak theater. Yeah, you know, I don't speak lighting cues. I don't speak stage cues. I just know what I want. And so, yeah, that's kind of everything that I've ever done. The true sense of me being satisfied with it is if I could actually achieve that.
That's a hard thing to explain to people when they don't see things in that way.
Oh, it's very difficult. People think you're being difficult. People think you're being flaky. People might think that, you don't know what you're talking about. They can be dismissive, but, okay, I'm here for a reason. You're being paid to do a job. Figure it out. So the opera itself is based on a woman that existed, I want to say in the 1800s. She was Swiss. She leaves Switzerland, dressed as a man, goes to Algeria, finds a Sufi order, becomes a Muslim, and then falls in love with an Algerian soldier. She's very critical of the French government at the time and the way that it's treating Algeria. So the Europeans aren't sure, like, whose side are you on? At some point, they send an assassin to kill her. They fail at that attempt. She is estranged from her husband throughout their marriage. She's got her own sense of how she wants to see the world, and she's reckless in a lot of ways. But there's a sense of her that's just not, she's restless at the same time. When she finally gets back with her husband, she decides, let's go live in the desert. The desert, there's peace there. We can be away from all of this nonsense. And at the same time, it feels like her life is short-lived and that death has just been on the back of her neck this entire time. So when this they called it a flash flood, but the desert has a lot of weird natural sort of storms that happen. Instead of running for cover, she stood in place and faced it and dies. And her journals are the way that they were able to craft her story together. So when this opera was done, it was done with this woman's story completely in mind. And so when they decided to produce it with a black lead, I was like, well, I'm not interested in sending a black woman to Algeria. And I'm also not interested in like chocolate Barbie doll dipping her in this story. Like, it needs to make sense for her. So I set it in the 1940s. Because I wanted to showcase sort of black wealth and trauma. So she leaves the South that she's from as a result of, white massacre coming in and like destroying the town and killing people. She goes to Detroit and she discovers the Nation of Islam. And that is how her conversion happens.
That's a bit okay. Detroit.
Because Detroit, Mosque Number 1 was founded in 1940 in Detroit, Nation of Islam. And I also love Malcolm X's autobiography and the way he talks about the nation and what the nation does for him. Like, there's a lot of issues, yes, with the nation, but when you think about what the Nation of Islam gave Black Americans at that time, an alternative way to not only access God, but access their humanity, I was like, yeah, that's what I want for her. Okay. And then, in my version, she falls in love with a Fruit of Islam soldier. It's forbidden. She leaves and she goes west. So she ends up in the Bay Area, dies in the desert that way. Being able to articulate, like draw down that story, because I remember pacing in my living room studio, trying to figure out how we're going to tell this story, how we're going to make it authentic for a Black woman. And that sense of I'll know it when I can see it was kind of there. And also just wanting to expand the spiritual consciousness of what Blackness can look like and the way that she moves was important to me. So she carries her Bible and she has to take her father's coat. She takes her mother's hat. She takes her brother's shirt because they're all dead and she has to carry these things with her. So she becomes this moving altar as we go through the story. I
like the way that sounds.
The perspective of what I'm trying to create requires everyone tapping into my language. And so that's where there were disconnects. It was because people were having a hard time. When it worked, it was freaking fantastic. So there are moments in the production that just take my breath away. Like the day of the production, it was on a Saturday, May 21st, I woke up and I had to come in 2 weeks ahead. So I'm there rehearsing. I'm having to learn how to read a score because there's no script in opera. There's the libretto, there's the composition. So there's the music, there's the words, and you have to look at the score to see how the words are sung. And I'm not a music reader. So I'm learning how to say, this is when I need you to step down. This is the emotion that I need at this part. So all of the things, like I thought of, the Ruth Carter piece was so powerful because I don't operate in opera, but as a cultural architect, if that's the medium, then that's what I'm going to do. And so there were these moments where it was like, it didn't occur to me that I was out of my depth. It didn't occur to me that what I was doing was particularly big. I had a job to do. I had a story that I had to get out, and I was just going to do it. So Saturday I wake up and I am so emotional. I can't stop crying. Like the whole idea of what has been created is just, it's like all kind of coming down on me. My dad couldn't come because something happened with his dental work, so he had to stay. And so he's like, yeah, I can't come, but I'm wishing you well. We've been checking in on me. And then one of my really good friends, she was able to make it. So that kind of grounded me in it. But man, let me tell you something. When you're creating these things that seemingly fall out of the sky and you actually get to see it, there are moments where I step outside of myself, was like, yo, you did that? And I'm like, yo, I guess I did. And there's this interesting sort of self-talk that you're doing, because it's like, yo, this is really kind of dope. I get to do this. This is not the life that I planned or that I even thought was possible, especially because I don't have that. I'm not solidly in that background. Yeah. The fact that someone was like, you're a visionary and I think you could do this, that's where that tribe, that advisory committee, it comes in handy, It really does, because sometimes people can see you further along than you can see yourself. So when I think about Ruth Carter talking about that moment where she's thinking about saying no, and that the fact that she wakes up and she just trusts that if Ryan Coogler thinks that she can do it, that should be enough. That's what nurturing that intuitiveness looks like. Because sometimes what's blocking your intuitiveness is the conditioning of pride, the conditioning of, oh, you're not good enough, and so you can't feel it. So having that person outside of you to be able to say, no, you can do this, that makes the journey, it makes the leaping a lot easier.
What you are saying sounds so beautiful. I'm not even...
I love it.